Tomorrow marks a grim anniversary for the Tory party. 1 year since it got rid of its Brexit-delivering, election-conquering leader Boris Johnson thanks to a spurious media witch hunt. The new PM, Rishi Sunak, is losing to Labour by an astonishing 22 points, which would reduce the Conservatives to a paltry 90 seats. But it could have been oh so different. Before Boris was stabbed in the back by Sunak when he was forced to announce his abdication, the polling deficit was a mere 5 points, not at all bad for a PM midway through his term. In her resignation letter last week, Nadine Dorries put it bluntly in speaking about the dire situation her party has created for itself.
We cannot simply disregard the democratic choice of the electorate, remove both the Prime Minister and the manifesto commitments they voted for, and then expect to return to the people in the hope that they will continue to unquestioningly support us. They have agency and they will use it. Your actions have left some 200 or more of my MP colleagues to face an electoral tsunami and the loss of their livelihoods. Because in your impatience to become Prime Minister, you put your personal ambition above the stability of the country and our economy.
So, was the defenestration of Boris Johnson the biggest political act of self-harm in modern British history? Let me bring in now Margaret Thatcher's former aide, Nile Gardiner. Niall, what do you reckon?
Well, Dan, great to be here on the show. I think without a doubt, Dan, the removal of Boris Johnson was an act of harakiri by the Conservative Party and an absolutely disastrous move. And I think the Conservatives are paying the price now for their decision. Boris Johnson was a big picture visionary. He was a winner. He was the man who ultimately delivered Brexit. And at the end of the day, he was also a Conservative Prime Minister. And I think that with Rishi Sunak today, we do have a lack of visionary leadership. We have the weak projection, I think, of leadership from Downing Street. He is not a Thatcherite Prime Minister. And I think that the doors are now open for the socialists to take back power, and that would be absolutely catastrophic for Britain, I think, and also for the future of Brexit here as well. So the stakes are extremely high. The removal of Boris Johnson and subsequently, of course, the removal of Liz Truss as well. Incredibly dangerous moves by the Conservatives, and they're now paying the price in the polls.
That's the thing, Niall, because Boris was a winner. And that's why all of the people who wanted him out, the moment they got rid of him, they all admitted it. Do you remember the Daily Mirror's political editor, Pippa Carrera, very quickly said, oh, Boris was the only one the Labour Party actually feared. She's, of course, now got across to be the political editor of The Guardian. There's no way Labour would have been ahead 25 points in the poll if Boris had still been in post. And he would have, at the very least, given them a very fair fight. What we're facing, Niall, is a potential generational shift in politics in this country, because if there's the sort of landslide that we saw in 1997, it could take the Conservatives well over a decade to regain power. And look, what if they do proportional representation? What if they then reduce the voting age to 16? You know, this is what people forget, and that's why I'm so angry that they made this decision 1 year ago.
Yeah, I think that if Labour takes power in the UK, it'll be absolutely disastrous for the British people. You would have a hard left government in power, possibly in coalition with the Lib Dems and even the Scottish nationalists. They could try and begin dismantling Brexit, undermining the democratic will of the British people. Boris Johnson was a real fighter. He was a winner. He was somebody who could relate to ordinary voters. I think he listened to the beating heart of the British people, as Margaret Thatcher always used to say. And I think his removal was just an astonishing act of self-harm by the Conservative ruling elites. They did not listen to the beating heart of the Conservative electorate. And as a result, large numbers of Conservative voters, I think, are likely to stay at home because they don't have faith, of course, in Rishi Sunak and his leadership. And it may take a very long time for the Conservatives to actually get back into power. They can only get back, I think, to their roots by returning to Thatcherism. And that's not happening, of course, right now with Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
And so Boris's removal was just absolutely a huge act of stupidity by the Conservative elites, actually.
And of course, Boris hasn't gone away. He hasn't gone away. I mean, Kwasi Kwarteng on this show last week revealed that he was in touch with him. He still has his ambition, but it doesn't feel like there's a path back for Boris before the next election, does it?
No, I mean, I think that very unlikely that Boris will be able to come back before the next election. But I do think Boris has a long-term political future. I think there's a good chance he may return one day as Prime Minister. So I think that those who write off Boris Johnson really underestimate him significantly. And I think he does have a long-term political future ahead of him. And I do think the Conservative Party has to return to its Thatcherite conservative roots, because it has moved to the centre ground. That is proving to be a real turn-off, I think, for British voters. They want to see a Conservative Party that actually believes in securing its borders, believes in fully delivering Brexit, cutting taxes, advancing economic freedom. We're not seeing that right now from the Conservative leadership.
No, and we need it.
And removing Boris Johnson was just a staggering act of monumental stupidity, I think.
Monumental stupidity. I couldn't agree more. Nile Gardiner. It's 1 year tomorrow, actually.